I don't say this at the beginning of every reading, but today I need to say it before anything else. If you found this video, if something made you click, if something pulled you here on this particular day, that was not an accident. I feel that with complete certainty as I look at what came out of this deck. This reading is not for everyone. It is for the person who has been in the dark long enough that they have started to wonder if there is any light left. The person who is still here, still watching, still hoping, despite everything that has tried to convince them to stop. Hi, I'm Liz. Take a breath. Whatever you have been carrying, put it down for a few minutes and let these cards speak. Because what I am about to read for you today is one of the most powerful and the most tender sequences I have ever pulled. The first card is the Nine of Swords, and I am not going to rush past this one, because this card deserves to be acknowledged before we move anywhere else. I sense that the people finding this reading have been through something that did not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened slowly, quietly, the kind of hard that accumulates, night after night, thought after thought, worry after worry, until it becomes the atmosphere you live inside, rather than something you are passing through. The Nine of Swords is the card of what happens at 3 a.m. when the world is asleep and your mind refuses to be. When the thoughts that are manageable during the day become enormous in the dark. For some people watching, this has been anxiety, a persistent low-level hum of fear about the future that makes it almost impossible to feel safe in the present. For others, it is grief, not always the grief of a specific loss, but the grief of a version of your life or yourself that you expected to have by now and don't. For others still, it is exhaustion, the specific bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been strong for so long, for so many people in so many situations, that they have almost forgotten what it feels like to rest. I want to say something directly to the person who recognizes themselves in this card. You are not broken, you are not weak, you are not someone who has failed at the task of keeping yourself together. You are someone who has been carrying an enormous amount with very little acknowledgement, very little rest, and very little certainty that any of it was leading anywhere meaningful. And that is not a personal failure. That is a human being at the edge of what they can hold alone. The Nine of Swords appears first in this reading, not to dwell in the darkness, but to name it. To say, yes, it has been this hard. Yes, the nights have felt this long. Yes, you are allowed to acknowledge how much this has cost you, because what comes next requires that acknowledgement. The healing cannot begin until the wound is seen. And what comes next is the Ace of Wands. I feel this card arriving in your reading the way a spark feels when it lands in a place that has been cold for too long, sudden, unexpected, carrying a warmth that you almost don't trust at first because you forgot what warmth felt like. The Ace of Wands is new life, new energy, not the manufactured kind that you try to summon through motivation or discipline or telling yourself to feel better, the real kind. The kind that arrives from somewhere that feels almost external, like something being handed to you rather than something you had to generate yourself. I sense this arriving for the people in this reading as an idea, a possibility, a door that appears in a wall you had stopped looking at. It might come through a conversation that sparks something, through something you read or hear or see that suddenly makes the future feel real in a way it hasn't in a very long time. Through a moment of clarity arriving in the middle of an ordinary day that makes you think, there it is. There's the direction. For some people, this is a creative spark, something that wants to be made, built, expressed, that has been buried under the weight of everything the Nine of Swords was carrying. For others, it is an external opportunity, an invitation, an opening, something that shows up and says, this is possible for you. For others, it is simpler and more personal than either of those. It is just the return of desire, the return of wanting something, the return of caring about your own future, enough to lean toward it. Do not dismiss that spark when it arrives. The Ace of Wands is fragile in its first moments. It needs to be received, protected, believed in enough to survive the doubt that will try to extinguish it. Receive it. It is real. and it is the beginning of everything that follows in this reading. Because flowing from that spark is the star. And I want to take a breath before I read this card, because the star is one of the most sacred cards in the entire tarot. It does not appear casually. It appears when someone has been through the dark long enough that they have earned the right to receive what it carries. What I sense with the star is the beginning of a very specific kind of healing. Not the fast kind, the real kind. The kind that happens when something inside you that has been clenched for a very long time begins, almost without your permission, to release. The kind that shows up first as a single moment of unexpected peace. A single morning where you wake up and the weight is slightly lighter and you notice it, and for a second you almost don't trust it because you have been so long without it that peace feels foreign. Trust it. The star says you are allowed to heal. You are allowed to begin to hope again. Not desperately, not clutching, but quietly. The way you cup a small flame with your hands to keep it from going out. I sense for many people watching that there has been a long period of protecting yourself from hope, of deciding somewhere along the way that it was safer not to want things too much, that hope had cost you something painful enough that you needed to hold it at a distance. The star does not judge that. It understands it. And then it offers you something anyway, a single undeniable light on the water showing you that the night has not won, that the darkness was a season and not a permanent state, that whatever you lost in the hardest part of this journey did not take your future with it. Your future is intact. It is waiting. And the star says it is more beautiful than what the darkness convinced you to accept as possible. But I would not be reading this honestly if I skipped what comes next. The Five of Wands. This card appears right here, right after the star, and I feel it is essential to acknowledge it rather than smooth past it. Because here is what I sense. The breakthrough does not arrive without a final resistance. Just as the light begins to return, just as the spark becomes real and hope becomes available again, something shows up that tests it. It might look like external noise. People who don't understand what you're building, circumstances that create friction, competition, or comparison that tries to make you doubt the direction you're moving. But more often for the people I sense in this reading, the Five of Wands is internal. It is the voice that rises loudest right when something good is beginning, the doubt that shows up precisely when you have started to believe, the old pattern that tries one more time to convince you that the fire is not real. The star is not for you. The spark will go out like every other spark. I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. The resistance at this point in the story is not a sign that you were wrong to hope. It is a sign that what you are hoping for is real enough to be worth defending. Resistance does not show up against things that don't matter. It shows up against things that do. Feel it, acknowledge it, and move through it anyway. Because on the other side of that resistance is the Knight of Swords. And the energy of this card in this position is unlike anything that came before it in this reading. Because the Knight of Swords is not cautious. The Knight of Swords does not wait for perfect conditions or guaranteed outcomes or the complete disappearance of fear before he acts. He moves decisively, directly, with a clarity that cuts through every reason that was used to justify staying still. I sense for the people in this reading that a decision is coming, not a small decision, a real one, the kind that requires you to choose the direction of your life over the comfort of your current position, the kind that requires you to act before you feel completely ready, because waiting to feel ready is the strategy that kept you in the Nine of Swords longer than you needed to be. The Knight of Swords says, you already know what to do. You have known for longer than you want to admit. The knowing is not the problem. The acting on the knowing that has been the difficulty. What I feel in this card is that the capacity to act is arriving, not from a sudden absence of fear, but from something more powerful than fear, from the accumulation of everything this reading describes, the healing of the star, the spark of the Ace of Wands, the endurance that survived the Nine of Swords, all of it combining into a kind of readiness that is quiet but unmistakable, that feels less like bravery and more like clarity. Like finally seeing so precisely what you want that nothing between you and it feels large enough to stop you anymore. And the final card is the Page of Wands. And I feel something light and bright and genuinely joyful when I look at this card in this position. Because the Page of Wands is the energy that awaits you on the other side of everything this reading has moved through. It is newness, real, complete, wide open newness. Not the kind that comes with dread or uncertainty about whether it will last, the kind that comes with curiosity, with the specific feeling of standing at the beginning of something and finding it exciting rather than frightening, of looking at what's ahead and feeling called toward it rather than bracing for it. I sense for many people in this reading that this newness is not just a new circumstance. It is a new relationship with yourself. The version of you that emerges from what this reading describes is different in a way that is difficult to quantify but impossible to miss, lighter, more themselves, less burdened by the weight of who they had to be to survive what they survived, more willing to be curious about what their life can become, rather than defensive about what it has been. The Page of Wands carries adventure. I feel that word specifically, adventure. And it feels important here because it implies that what is coming is not just good, but genuinely interesting. That the next chapter of your life is not simply an easier version of the difficult one, but a genuinely different story, written from a different place, in a different voice, about a different version of what is possible. The hardest days are behind you, not somewhere in the distant future, behind you. The cards in this reading trace a sequence that has already begun and is already moving. The Nine of Swords is where you were. The Page of Wands is where you are going, and everything in between, the spark, the healing, the resistance, the decision, is the path between them. A path you are already on. You made it through the part that was supposed to break you, and what comes next is the reason it didn't. Leave a comment below. Which card in this reading felt most like exactly where you are right now? Like this if it landed. Subscribe for more readings and share this with someone who needs to be told today that their hardest days are ending. I'll see you in the next one.